You're so warmly welcome to this meeting tonight at the parish Eugenia in the city center of Stockholm. Tonight we will continue our discussion and presentation of the encyclical on the creation and on our common home. And I say welcome to you, Michael Czerny. It's so great to have you here in Sweden. Together with you is Nina Eklund and also Svante Axelsson, both really distinguished people here in Sweden in the environmental work, both in business community, in politics, and also with the environmental movement as such. So great to see you all here. And you, Michael, told me that, yes, you could say that they can see me like sort of a grandfather here because you felt you were a bit older than us others. But yes, you're very experienced. We like that very much. But mainly, you have an impressive work behind you. I mean, you've been a Jesuit originally from Canada, but with a family with the roots in Czech Republic. So you really connect to different continents. You were first served as the founding director of the Jesuit Center of Social Faith and Justice in Toronto from 1979 to 89. You were also director of the Human Rights Institute of the University of Central America in El Salvador. So that brings in the Latin American perspective. And I know also Thomas Hammarberg, the Commissioner for Human Rights at the European Council. He really sent his great regards to you, as he said you're really a close friend and a great co-worker in this work on human rights. From 1992 to 2002, you served as the Secretary for Social Justice of the Jesuit Curia, and subsequently you served as the founding director coordinator of the African Jesuit AIDS Network until 2010. Since 2009, you have been an adjutor to the African Bishop Conference and Synod, and now you are part of President's Office at the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace in the Vatican. And you've also really followed the work process on this encyclical. So I think for us it's a great opportunity to listen to you and to see you here. Just to introduce Nina and Svante and not make you just wait for it. I first of all turn to you, Nina. I mean, you have really a combined background from business community and from politics. You are currently the program director for the Haga Initiative and chairperson of the board of Fast Forward to a Greener Future 2050. And you have also been a member of the board of the Christian Democratic Party, and you have also been voted actually one of the most influential persons in Sweden on environmental issues. So as a former environment minister, I feel jealous. Then also turning to Svante Axelsson, I mean, you represent, I think it's fair to say, the big environmental organization in Sweden. You're the Secretary General of the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation since the year 2000, so you're very experienced in your position. You have really had the capacity also to bridge and relate to very different positions in different parties and different communities and different occasions. And the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation is both the biggest member-based environmental organization in Sweden, but I think also really the oldest and in that sense the most experienced ones. And you were also once, you have several times been voted one of the most influential persons in Sweden on environmental issues as well. So you shared that honor, both of you, and that's the reason why we asked you come here, because we want influential people to be part of this panel. So we will start now with you, Michael, and I said as you are the keynote speaker tonight, we start with listening to your comments and also how you relate to what you have experienced in other parts of the world. You told me that you just yesterday arrived from Bogota, so it's really quite a different part of the world. just past Madrid. Not that cold as in Sweden, but so very different, and it's great to have you here. Very welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. However, I have to change a little bit of the introduction. This is my first time in Sweden,
yeah.
And I actually don't just come in general from the Czech Republic. I come from Moravia, and within Moravia I come from Brno.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you all grew up learning about Brno, but we who come from Brno learned about you. Because, as I might remind the few who don't know this, in 1645, the Swedes laid siege to Brno for 3 months. And it was a desperate situation.
Yeah.
And fortunately, on our side was someone who spoke Swedish, and he overheard the Swedish commander saying, "This is, we are fed up with this situation. If we do not take the city by noon tomorrow, we're leaving." And so the battle began, and it wasn't going very well for us. And so the Jesuit priest and the other commander conspired, and they rang the noon bells at 11. And thinking that it was noon and they still hadn't taken the city, the Swedes left. And so we have a glorious page in our history. Whether you agree with this version of the story, I don't know, and I'm not trying to insist that we debate it, but I appreciate this is the first time in my life I was able to tell the story to a Swedish audience. So whenever you hear the bells ringing at noon, please know that in Brno they ring at 11, even to this day.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm very, very happy to be with you, and I hope in these few minutes I will ask our distinguished chair, who didn't introduce himself because I trust you know who he is, but he has an impressive background as we do. He will cut me off when it's enough.
Yeah. Yep. Try to be very nice.
So, to appreciate, first of all, I would like to rejoice that besides my English copy, we also have a Swedish copy. I think this is a wonderful sign, and I would...
And I promised I will comment more on that, but
Fine.
I thought you should introduce it.
Fine.
It gives better weight.
All right, now, when you hear about Laudato Si, you might ask yourself, what is this encyclical about? And it's easy to say that it's about ecology, or that it is a green encyclical in which, let's say, the Holy Father incorporates ecological thinking into Catholic thinking, or you might say it's about climate change. Some people, you read it in the Pope's encyclical about climate change. These are not false, but they're not a very good way of understanding this encyclical. So I would like to introduce with a little exercise. If you can imagine yourself in bed at that moment, that first moment when you make the transition from sleeping to waking, and try to reconstruct what it is that you experience. And I would suggest maybe that the first thing that you do when you begin to wake up is that you hear. And then a few moments later, perhaps you smell. And then you maybe have some sense of touch. And then you open your eyes. Now, if you do this as you did here, as you did this morning here in Stockholm, most people here in the room know what the typical sensations would be, what you would feel, what you would hear, what you would smell. But imagine yourself in some other place doing the same thing. Imagine, to take a very difficult place, imagine if you did this in Port-au-Prince, in Haiti, or in some other country that you know, if you could do the exercise actually, and see or imagine the difference between what you are beginning to absorb into yourself at the beginning of your day and what other people are absorbing. Now, for the Holy Father, that's what the encyclical is about. The encyclical is about environment, and environment is what begins as I wake up, extends through my daily life, and doesn't stop until we reach the very borders of the universe. Yeah. That is the environment. That is what the encyclical is about. In other words, it is about that relationship that each one of us has with our environment, and or our immersion in our environment, and how it reaches out and how it draws us out, and how it, in a sense, since we come from a privileged place, how it responsibilizes us as we go. That's the environment. That's what the encyclical is about. And what is the point of unity? The point of unity is that from the very beginning until we reach the edge of the universe, it all has one creator. There is one creator, one Father, one God, whose principal characteristics are care and mercy. Care and mercy. He cares so very much for all that he has made, and he is merciful. He forgives our sins. So that is what the encyclical draws us into. It brings us into reality in a way which many of us have never considered reality before. We have often, or typically, thought of ourselves more separately, in some ways more self-centeredly, more individualistically, and more isolatedly. So, this sounds like theory, but if you do it through my little experiment, you see this is not theory. The Holy Father says everything is interconnected. So as I go from these first perceptions all the way out to the end, there's nothing which I can say, oh, well, that has nothing to do with me. No, there's nothing that has nothing to do with me. It all has to do with me and with us. With me and with us. So that's what the encyclical is about. And if you would like to appreciate it, it maybe would be helpful if I said a little bit about how it is structured. And there are 6 chapters, and it begins with an introduction, a brief introduction, basically in which, a bit like this evening, the Holy Father introduces the people who are coming with us on this trip. So he introduces his 4 predecessors, the 4 previous popes. Then he brings in the Patriarch of Constantinople, who has never found himself in a Catholic encyclical before, and then Saint Francis. And so with these fellow travelers, he feels we are ready. And so then there are 6 chapters. And one simple way of appreciating it, if you look at the index, which you will now be able to do in Swedish, so this will be very helpful, you see 6 chapters, and you can think of them like this. There's always a problematic and then a response. In other words, it's a dialogue. It promotes dialogue very much, but it's actually set up as a dialogue. So the first chapter is to take a look at the world we're in. It's a much more sophisticated way of doing what I suggested. Opening our eyes, our ears, our noses, our sense of touch, and above all, our feelings. And this maybe is interesting in this city which hosts important ecological research units. He asks a very interesting question. Why would we bother with science? What's the point? And he says it's not because we're curious to satisfy our curiosity. It's not to have polemical debates. In order to, we need the science in order to inform ourselves so that we can suffer and change. Science in order to suffer and change. I don't know if anyone has ever defined science like that. But if you think about it a bit, and maybe some of you have the same experience, that certain of the issues which are included under ecology simply make you feel sick. Some people feel it because of the gorillas, and other people feel it because of the trees. But there is an emotional thing, and he says this is essential because those feelings can eventually be translated into the willingness to change. In any case, so the first is about environmental and social degradation. We take a look at what the situation is. And an important thing is that you will never see environmental and social separated. In other words, the Holy Father says there are not two crises. There is one crisis, one major crisis with its environmental and social aspects. And since they are separated from the beginning, hopefully they will also be connected. Since they're not separated at the beginning, hopefully they will be also connected in the end. And I think that some of us here in front are very convinced that let's say solution to the ecological crisis is and must be of itself the solution also to the social crisis. And I think that some of the better business people see that now, that it's not a choice between. So the first chapter sets up the problem. So we see in order to suffer. And then the second is looking at our faith tradition. And there we could say we believe in order to see. We believe in order to see. In other words, the response to the suffering is to go deeper in order to see more, in order to embrace more of reality. Because of our faith tradition, our scripture helps us to discover, you might say, the roots of the problem and also, hopefully, the sources for the solution. So the first two chapters are a dialogue, you might say the scientific problem and the religious response. Then the third chapter goes even deeper than we usually like to go, which is the human roots of the crisis. So what we, in Catholic language and other religious language, call sin. In other words, how is it that we, human beings who have this important role, create so much trouble? And then the response to that sin of ours. What is you might say, what is the answer to these sins? And maybe I should just identify that if there's one word for the sin, it is technocracy. It is this false belief which those of us who are alive today have largely accepted, and that is that that there are finance-driven technical solutions for everything. And so if we can reduce everything to a kind of techno-financial problem, then that will be the solution. But with it, of course, comes the techno-financial ideology, and that is a root of our problem, which more personally then he calls anthropocentrism, a false view of how we are, let's say, at the top of the heap, the evolutionary heap or something like that. So then the response to that is, so what is a view contrary to technocracy, to the wrong kind of human self-centeredness, and that is integral ecology. And maybe this would be a good moment just to mention the dimensions of integral ecology, how it takes. Remember, we started our day by eventually being connected with everything, so integral ecology will include everything. The dimensions of integral ecology are environmental, so natural, economic, social, cultural. And now comes something which I don't think has ever been in an encyclical before, and I wonder if we often think about it as an environmental problem. Daily life. Daily life. How do most people in the world spend their day? Or to go back to our experiment, if you opened your ears, your nose, your eyes, yourself in Haiti on some morning, in Port-au-Prince or in another place. What is it that you are faced with? How are you going to spend your day? What is the meaning of your daily existence? It's not just how bad it smells, or the terrible things you see, or the horrible noise you hear, but what is your daily life? And the environment that, what is the environment? The environment is the environment that most of us live in. And those of us who are in this room, with a few exceptions, do not live in the same environment as most of us live in. We live in a very special, privileged environment. So the encyclical is more concerned with how most people spend their day than with how a few people spend their day. That's just it. It's a kind of, in some ways, a kind of a simple statistic. So daily life, as I try to begin with, daily life is at the heart of the environment. It's important how we spend our day. It's important how we can spend our day. And the other thing, which I'm very happy to see because I'm at a certain point in my life, the other is intergenerational. In other words, and this might be an interesting thing, ecology is not just for young people. You know, this is the kind of thing that you get enthusiastic about when you're young and then later you grow out of it. No, this is intergenerational. This is concern for the young and those in the middle and the old. And not just the young and the old who are here now, but especially, what about the young and eventually the old who will come later? How connected are we with them? Because remember, our awareness goes out to the edge of the universe. That is, it includes those who will come later. It includes those who will come later. So those are the dimensions of integral ecology. Then in the 5th chapter, and this is maybe a bit surprising for you, at least I find it's a happy surprise. You say, fine, this is all fine, and it's all very difficult and very challenging. What, dear Holy Father, do you suggest? And can you believe it? There's a one-word answer. This church which produces so many documents, when you finally say, now that we have grasped the real problem, what's the answer? Does anybody know? There's one word. You can only use one word. What's the answer to the problem that we now have in front of us? Only one word: dialogue, 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 dialogue. I already said that the encyclical is structured as 3 sets of dialogue. So he not only proposes dialogue, he actually, in some ways, illustrates it. He uses it himself. And it's so dialogue. And again, there is... the understanding of dialogue is very inclusive, and we are part of that now in a special way because of the big conference starting next week. But this dialogue is international, it's national, it's local, it's also the dialogue with science, the dialogue with civil society. And then the final chapter, as if to say, fine, this is a terrible situation, this is a nice suggestion. Where are we going to get the strength? Where are we going to get the strength? And here we have a 2-word answer. 2-word answer. Education and spirituality. Education or formation and the life of the spirit. If this is the task, then we cannot approach it in a kind of a flat way, in a kind of a one-dimensional way. And so the final chapter, which is very, very beautiful, begins with what many of us could figure out, what is needed to educate people, especially young people, but also people like us who can still change, and what are the different things that we should be encouraged to do. And here, just so that we don't think that this is somewhere in the clouds, the Holy Father says, let's not be somehow over-impressed with the complexity and think that our little things don't matter. Little things do matter. Everything matters. Everything is connected. So one of the ones I like very much is he praises a person who has enough money to turn up the heat, but instead puts on a sweater. That's Laudato Si. That is Laudato Si. Imagine if, from what we have said now, what is involved when a person says, I know I can turn up the heat, but instead I will put on a sweater. I think that's very marvelous. It's very marvelous. It doesn't leave anybody out. But it also doesn't leave anybody irresponsible. Yeah, those who turn up the heat, those who spend 20 minutes under the shower, those who drive SUVs, you know, we really are responsible. We really are. And facing our responsibilities now, not saying that someday there will be a green law and then it will be, no. By the way, usually I've given some talks like this before. This is the first time that I'm giving the talk when the water is actually in glasses from a pitcher. That means I have finally reached Sweden because whether it's in Bogota or in Italy and it's always the plastic bottles, and then of course you can imagine the paragraph with me waving the plastic bottle and saying this must stop, this cannot go on, this is absurd. Anyway, I'm very happy to see the glasses. Well, you lost the show. You lost the show, but you won the prize. You won the prize. So, Mr. Chair, how are we doing time-wise?
I think we do like this. If you conclude, then I will just make sure you can introduce some comments, and then I will lead you forward.
Fine. So let's do that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now I turn to you, Nina, and I think with also your background from both politics and with business community, and also is now representing the progressive businesses, you can say, where they really show that this is part also of making your trading and your business and your profitability, but also with your really deep background in environmental issues, and also worked with with Johan Rockström and with some of the great scientists on the environmental field. So what are your main impression of the encyclical, and what are the main comments you would like to raise?
Oops.
Oh, can I help?
Oops.
Yeah.
So, rekvisita. When Lovad vare du came from Pope Francis, I was so impressed. And my first thought was, I hope all religion do the same thing. It's so important, and we have such a short time. And it was really lovely to hear your structure, because I have read this with other glasses. So I started to put on new glasses now, and Michael, when you talked about it in this way. But I will start in another end here. My friend told me this last weekend, I always go shopping when I'm depressed. Mm. So I brought something to symbolize consumption. I don't know, I got this from somewhere, I think. I don't know if I bought it. I have it in the drawer, and it's floating candles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Fantastic.
Floating candles. So this is consumption. And I was thinking on Maslow's behovspyramid, Maslow's hierarchy of need. And I realized that these candles, it's not in the stairs, because it's not safety, it's not love or belonging, it's not esteem, it's not self-actualization. It's nothing. It's consumption. So we do consume ourselves to happiness. That's what we do. And there is where church comes in. How to find meaning and purpose and you said it in such a good way recently, Michael, life of the spirit and education, and coming down to responsibility. So how to find purpose and how to find happiness in our lives. And then I was thinking on the chicken and the hen. Who comes first? Is it business fault? Are they the baddies who want us to consume? Or is it the politicians who lack incentives to make us go the right path? Or is it religion? If everyone went to church, should there be less shopping and less consumption? So, back to consumption. When we get more money in the privileged world, we get bigger houses, we get bigger cars, we go more to Thailand and less to Småland, that's a small region here in Sweden. And we get new kitchen, bigger sofas, and floating candles. And that comes down to oil, coal, and less resources. So we do need to fix this together, and we do have the responsibility, and Michael said, facing our responsibility. By understanding each other, talking to each other, Michael said, dialogue, 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 and acting together. Taking leadership together, personal leadership and leadership from policy, from business, from CEOs. But I want to give you something from the business side. I want to send something with you, because when I was reading Lovad vare du, I sometimes felt something that we could probably discuss later, and now I understand why, because you have more of the perspective from the south than to the north. Business, all businesses is different. Some company takes responsibility, some don't. It's different. But business responsibility is growing. We can see that when we talk about sustainability, some companies do make more than they are needed to. And we can see, if you have the business perspective where I work, climate measures are often profitable. Sustainability is brand strengthening. And the people that was born in the 80s, they want to work in companies that are sustainable. And corporate climate activities also decrease risk. So it is consumers, it's us, that makes the company. When we shop, when we consume, we give the money to these companies. If we change how we consume, we change what happens in the companies, and also north and south perspective. So, floating candles or not. And some things that we can see that it's changing right now. Pension funds, we all have pension funds in some way. They divest in coal and oil. They take the coal and oil away. They invest in green. And they go to meetings and they vote for more sustainability. And who helped them to do that? You, me, together. You were talking about me and you and you and me. It's important. The car companies, they get electric cars. That's because of you and because of me. The solar panel and the winds in the energy companies, it's because of you and because of me, because we are changing them. So business, you have to remember, CEO are also humans. They also have children, and that come back from kindergarten saying, hey, you can't throw that one in that basket, you have to recycle it. Or you can't drive the car over there, you have to take the bike with me, Dad. They also want to do something about climate change and the future. And Petter Stordalen, he owns a lot of hotels. here in the Nordic countries and a lot of other countries. He said, there's no business on a dead planet. And that's a little bit of the attitude we're starting to see in the business community. So my final comment is, it all comes down to our humans, to you and me, to our choices, because it's we that hold the planet in our hands.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, finally, I turn to you, Svante. And I mean, if you look at this encyclical, and also with the eyes of environmentalists and the environmental movement as such, what could the environmental movement make out of it? Are there any common tasks? Are there also perspectives where you might take another view, or where you would say that, well, it's not enough, or this is the wrong way, something like that?
Thanks for that. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to have that we have the Pope just now. He's very popular. I love him also. He's a rock star, and he has a big impact on all leaders in the world. So I think we are really happy, because the challenge is huge. So I'm very happy that we have this book and they have this Pope, and that you are here and I can be in this church, that we together can fight, because we have one planet and we really have much to do. That's my start. I think the first impression I got is that the Pope widening the words. I got new glasses on my eyes, and I see the word in a new dimension. I think the ecology is more wider now, and he talked very much about that the human being is part of the ecology system. We're not of the top. We're a friend with the cows and horses and the water. We are all together, like Franciscus tell us earlier. I think it's a new language from the church, and I think that's very, I'm proud about that, and it gives us very strong support when we see each to the world and to each other in that way, because we need these dialogues with the water and with the horses and with the human beings. We need to listen much more, that we are part of this planet. So that's a big impact when I read this book. The other thing that is very important is also he talked about the market. The market has no soul. The market could be good or wrong. I think we need to be much more stronger in our policies and in our society to steer the market in our way. And that's also a thing I think is important, especially for the church and for the environmental movements, to see all values, not only the monetary values. Because I see that we have a sub-optimal situation. We maximize the money, but we don't maximize the values. Because we have two languages, and one language is much more stronger than the other language. So we are not so happy that we could be. And I think the church and the environmental movements and all other needs to be much more strong to make this new language strong as the money language. Because now we have only talked about growth and consumption and money, but we need to maximize the values. And one big family of values is, of course, ecological services. We haven't seen them before. We knew that we have them, but we haven't really seen them. So we need to make this discussion in society more, these voices need to be listened to, both of them, not only to the money. And that's very important. And I think also we need stronger institutions that can make these values visible, and also can steer the market in much more stronger way, with laws and taxes and so on, because now we have a laissez-faire politique. We need to make much more strong in how we want to have this society. I'm also very interested in how we can change this society, because the situation is now that we know very much because of the science, and we suffer also, but we couldn't really change our societies. Why? where are the obstacles? Because now we know, and we are looking forward to see another word. We can make another word, but it's still very, very slowly. And that's also discussion. In my perspective, I think that perhaps this crisis, it's easier to solve many crises at the same time. Because when we can see the synergy effects together, and we have this Agenda 2030, 17 goals, and we can solve this together. It's easier to solve many problems at the same time. And that's why we need to have a sort of concept for the better world, for the better society. And that's also, I think it's interesting to see how we can now make a picture, and make a vision, and how we can change this world. Because I think many people still think that it's dangerous to change. It could be worse. But in my opinion, I think now is the time for looking that this crisis could make us, to take us to another level of humanity. We can build another world. And if we take this crisis together, we can really make this world much, much better place. And if we can visualize these different pictures, many people is longing to this situation. And I think the church and the environmental movements and the companies need to really paint together, because we are so afraid of changing. But I think the changing is a way of being more happy. And I think if we really can find these attractive pictures of the future, many people will change much, much faster. So I'm very happy about this book. I'm happy about the Pope, because we got new values and non-monetary values in the discussion, and we have a discussion about why we are here. And we have a huge challenge in front of us to really make this world to a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's very temptive. No, it's a great temptation really to move into the discussion, and we will. But before that, to make sure you don't just become too exhausted with the heat here with the lamps, and also with this constant Swedish need for either coffee or tea. We make a short break. You will be able to get some coffee or water or tea or whatever you want here in the cafe. We come back and we start the discussion, both with the panel and also just after a while, I'll invite you. Finally, I should just make sure you are aware of this great moment, because it's not just the great moment where you were here, Michael, and where you both, Svante and Nina, are here and we discuss together. It's also the moment where we really present this great Swedish translation. And Carlotto Verkelid, you have done the great work. It's really impressive. And coming like internationally with the English and with Italian and the Spanish translations, you don't understand how historic this is. We have never, I think, had any papal encyclical translated so quick into Swedish as this time. So it's record. It's record. Now you must contribute to the record and start buying it here, and there will be a possibility to that. And finally, also, I say that yes, currently I am, or today, I'm working at the Newman Institute, and this evening is hosted by the Catholic Forum and the Newman Institute together. So we're very happy to see you here. And as being Andreas Carlgren, it's now a great moment also to say, please come and have some coffee. Great.
Thanks.
So, we just move into the discussion where we left it. And I think you, Svante, you said, we have the science, yes, we suffer, but we change slowly. Why? And I think that is a very useful question. So that's one thing. how really to make this change happen. And the other thing is, where you said, Nina, some businesses are taking responsibilities, but not all. And that again, I mean, it's not just, I guess, because the consumers are not asking, it's also because of the drivers behind the businesses. So these are two, I think, important tracks. There could be others, but I give the floor to you, Michael. Maybe comment some on this, based also on the encyclical and the thinking behind it.
There, to an astonishing degree, the encyclical insists very much on consumer responsibility. I mean, basically, the Pope says, now, if the businesses will not listen, let me just tell you, you buy them out of business. Just buy them out of business. They will get the message. And if you don't blame them. Blame yourselves. Yeah, if you keep buying those pink candles, don't say that it's you know the planet heated up and I don't know why. You know why. You know why. And I think that's important, because it's the solution is not, let's say, more police to check on those who are not recycling their garbage. That's that kind of that feeling which I think people, for example, in the United States get, is that this is going to be some kind of new big totalitarian state intervention in our lives. That's a big mistake. The Holy Father is not calling for that, and I don't think any of us believe it will make a difference anyway. But the people who keep buying those things really are responsible for that. They really are. And to say, well, just my one purchase isn't going to make a difference. Well, no, but okay, but that's your sin. That is a sin. That's not just a bad choice or bad taste.
What do you mean here?
Yes, I agree. A really bad thing.
But let me add something which I didn't bring in before, and because I think it's quite a wonderful thing. I don't know if any of you have played this game, but to ask yourself, what is in the middle of a book? What is in the center? And sometimes it's really quite astonishing. And this is the case with this text. That if you divide the number of chapters by 2 and then go to the middle, and so I would call it not so much the center, but what is the pivotal notion? The pivotal notion, the notion when halfway through the hinge turns. And the pivotal notion is human work. In the very center of the encyclical, is a passionate 5 passionate paragraphs about the centrality and the importance of human work. And I have the feeling that if somebody wanted to, that if you would take those paragraphs and say, this is going to be the glasses that I'm going to look at the environmental crisis, and then the whole social environmental crisis with, I would say that is a wonderful idea. A wonderful idea. It is so, in other words, to say if people, and remember we're talking in the name of the billions who are not like us, the vast majority who are not like us, who don't have the chances we have, we say the heart of the problem, the pivotal issue, is how those people are going to work with dignity and sustainability. With dignity and sustainability. And to understand that our way of life, our consumer choices, some of our government policies are obstacles for them and our business friends. And maybe to add to the discussion, this is the problem, the business that I found last week. So I won't repeat, I don't remember the statistics for the deforestation of the Amazon. But there are agreements now that Amazonian wood that comes to Europe has to be certified. Yeah. And so you have the good conscience that if you do use Amazonian wood, at least it has been certified. A bishop from the Amazon told me that criminals have gotten hold of part of the business, and that Amazonian wood is coming to Antwerp, which is the distributing receiving point, with false certification. False certification. So this is another kind of a paradigm, or say this is a case study. This is the world we live in. It's not just business and greed and consumers. It's also criminality. It's also incapacity or unwillingness, unwillingness of the Brazilian government to govern. Yeah. So these are the kind of knots that have to be untied. It's not enough to have the whole system of certification, but now we have to make doubly sure that is the certification authentic. So that's the world we're in.
Yes. Nina, I mean, would you comment something on the businesses and what are really the driving forces, except from just the demand from consumers, that could make a change? And to what extent does businesses themselves need also governmental intervention to really make sure they have a level playing field where they compete from in other situations than otherwise?
It's a lot. It's a lot of drivers. Consumers on one hand, and then you have the investors and the financial market, and the attitudes in the financial markets, and also the policy in the country where you have the business. But it all boils down to, I come back to that, to us consumers, because when we buy things, we give the money to the companies, so it boils down to us. But all the incentives, the country's incentives, business to business, it all comes together, and we do need to change. I think it's people in the companies that are in the management team. We do have to change the attitudes there. And if you are a leader for a big company, I think you have a huge responsibility. The responsibility is bigger if the company is bigger, I think, in one way, because you affect in a big way. A company that buys wood from the Amazonas, it's a huge responsibility, not only for today, but for the future, and the children and the children's children. So talking about incentives, I think, maybe you don't think so, but I think in Sweden we could have a stronger leadership from policy. I think we could do more, because I think Sweden is the perfect country to be, what you should say, the forerunner, because we have the possibilities here in Sweden. If we can't be the forerunner, what country could? Because you were proud about the water here, and we have the attitudes, correct? If you say the attitudes on the right side, we have the nature, we have the forest, we have the water, so we can do a lot. So if we can't be the forerunners, who should? So that's why I think the incentives here in Sweden are important, because I think we can spread good ideas to other countries, especially in the European Union, but also in Paris. So I think what I would like to see from policy is being tough on carbon tax. We have fossil fuel subsidies today, and we need to change that also. And I think business will follow if it's long term, and if it's fair competition. So business won't scream so much if it's long term and if it's fair. So I think a more brave policy from Sweden, but also from the European Union. So I think and I also think that we have a bigger responsibility in the rich countries and the privileged countries. And I think we should do more, of course.
And Svante, if you look at this as an environmentalist, I mean, and looking for more of interventions by both political decisions, maybe also, as you talked a lot about changing the attitudes, you said mainly that, well, in the end, it's everyone's search for happiness that could create a change. And here, Michael said also, well, science and suffer. Could you comment on really the difference in attitude there, and how do they relate to each other, both these aspects?
I think that we have to widening, like the Pope do, the word environment, because it's a problem. When we talk about the environment, we think about costs and suffer. If we talk about welfare, a new vision, a new society, a new step for humanity, it's much, much wider. And that's I love the word Sustainable Development Goals, the sustainable agenda. I mean, we need to talk much wider than just talk about environmental problems. Because I think if we talk about changing, or we say we have to change, some people will be afraid, oh, it's a bit worse. And some people say, oh, something good can happen. And I think we need to visualize this vision. And that's why I'm talking so much about suboptimal situation. This is not so happy. We are not so happy that we are sitting here. We are rather nice to be here, of course. But if we look around us, we are not very proud of our society. When I talk to my children, what's happening on the earth, I shame as a father. It's not a really good word we have given to our children. So now it's time for changing. It's time to make another vision. And that's why I talk to discuss not suffering of what's happening, but we need to show people that it's not a big suffer to go out of the fossil society. Because now I feel that we are afraid about climate change, but we are also afraid about climate policy. We are more afraid about taxes than environmental change. We are more afraid about the medicine and the sickness. So why? And that we need to talk about this, because if we can't show a way that are rather popular, rather it's fascinating, we can't get this rapid movement. And I think if we really show the children and the people in Stockholm and so on, many people is now, what is most what is modernity? What is the word? Modalitet.
Yes. Modernity. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. It's to be don't eat so much. Don't eat so much meat. Bicycle. I have no car. I have a solar cellar on my roof. That's the type of new happiness, and I think that's important to talk about. That we are suffering if we stand still, but if we are going forward, it's a sort of freedom. It's a way out of this bad situation. And if we take that type of pedagogic language, it's easier to get people with us. And I think that's a lack of political leadership, because we need leaders now. We have Angela Merkel, only one we have in Europe. Can talk about the change and that we are going to make this world better. That must be the answer, even to this climate change.
But then, I mean, to compare with the Pope here, he is, in a sense, quite tough against this and says, well, sometimes you use this language about sustainability just to, in a sense, hide the real change that has to be made. And the other aspect is that, well, if you just try to attract people by the easy message, in a sense, he dares here to come with a much tougher message and say, well, you also have to suffer. And could you, Michael, expand a bit on also how you look at this difference, and also maybe how it's related to this north-south perspective, which I think where we are not, I mean, we are aware in Sweden, but we're still part of that.
That's right. I think one way of seeing it is to look at how much we, all of us now here, are affected by the Reagan-Thatcher revolution. I think this was an important turning point for the worse. And this shared, more or less shared myth that we have here in the north, that the market knows best. And the less you interfere with it, the happier more and more of us will be. This is a big lie. This is a very big lie. And it has taken the guts out of our politics. It has made us into consumerists to an unprecedented degree. And it has justified economic behaviors which the Pope identifies as the reigning and very damaging ideology. And so there we have a tough fight, a tough fight. And I don't think it's in the encyclical, but in some other place he has said, this economy kills. This is not a question just of fine-tuning. This economy kills. It's not directly killing the people in this room. We don't see the ones that are being killed elsewhere. You are talking more about the way it is killing us, making us unhappy, making us ashamed in front of our children, which I think is a great, because one of the central, if you say, what is the encyclical is the answer to the question, what kind of world do we want to leave to our children and our children's children? That is the Holy Father's pivotal question. My pivotal proposal is to look at human work, but that's more as a way of understanding the whole picture. So if this economy kills, then your work and all of our work is harder. It means more change, deeper change, and more life-changing change for people like us than we first realize. That's so that we've gone into a deeper level. And I'll give you the example that I learned last week. I was at a meeting called Pan-Amazonic. So it was trying to deal with people for the whole Amazon basin, which includes parts of 8 or 9 or even 10 countries in South America. And the question is, what shall we do about the Amazon? And I think the good but superficial answer is things like well, let's certify the wood that comes so that we don't take more of it. And the radical answer is, can we entrust the Amazon to the Amazonians? Can we entrust the Amazon to the Amazonians? Can we live in a world in which the Amazonian people have the first say on how the Amazon will be? We have entrusted Sweden to the Swedes, but not the Amazon to the Amazonians. And I, as a white, as a northerner, I do appreciate that to make the act of faith, the leap of faith, and say, no, the Amazonians actually not only have the right, but they also have the wisdom to handle the Amazon in a way that will be of the greatest benefit to the whole common home, as this encyclical calls it. That is a big step. That is a very big step in I think. And I think that's what the encyclical calls for.
Great. Yes, Nina, Svante, short, and then we move into the audience. Yeah.
I don't know if I dare to mention the companies I work with.
Try.
But I try. Coca-Cola, McDonald's is a few companies that I work with. And they
Can I withdraw my permission?
And I work with the Swedish Coca-Cola and the Swedish McDonald's, for example. And I just mentioned them because they're worldwide and it's big multinationals. And here in Sweden, like Coca-Cola have a reduction target with 80% of their carbon dioxide until 2020. And Coca-Cola and McDonald's have 40-50% until 2020. That's more offensive, if you say so, ambitious than the government. So I just want to tell you that, and when McDonald's and Coca-Cola do changes here in Sweden, being a multinational, of course, they got a prize. One of the companies got a prize from the European or World Organization because they were so ambitious. and because that gives what you call rings on the water, so it changes. These companies, they have decided, the companies that I work with, that we must interfere in the economy. It's very important that we do it, because that's the way to change in the future. So when we come to the medicine or the sickness, as Svante talked about, we are pro-medicine, I would say that. So there are companies that are changing, and we're trying to talk about this because we want to tell policy that be brave, because we are some companies that won't say no if you have an ambitious policy. We will say yes.
Svante.
Yes, as an environmental economist, I have to comment on this economy. I think the economy and the market generate and reflect values. Generate and reflect, and it's generate also. And the erosion is coming after education. 5 years education, you got erosion of your values. So that's why I always go back to this need institutions that really can talk about these values, not monetary values, but other values. And that's why churches, and environmental movements, and other is so important. So we look at the both eyes, not only with one eye. And that's why I think we are going so wrong. We are looking only where the money is, not where the values are. And then I talk also, I think, how can we change this society? And what will be the communication language? And then, I mean, we have to solve the acute problems, like jobs and growth. And that's I'm more pragmatic. I don't think we need to talk about, you really have to change your lifestyle. It's a tough way we have to go. I don't think that's a right strategy, because we can solve many problems now. Because if you can't solve the acute problems, you are on the 4th or 5th place in this Minister of the State's head. So now we go upstairs and solve their problems, growth and jobs. And we can create the growth and jobs in the short term, because we need to do very much things. New cars, new buildings, everything. So you have to be pragmatic and solve one problem step by step. Because if we tell the whole story now, we don't get people with us. So that's why I'm talking about new technology. It's very good now. We need LED lamps, and we need solar cellars, and we need electric cars, and we need much new technology. That's not the whole answer, but it's a half answer, and it's an answer that people in the strong positions listen to, and they want to be with us in that big moment if we talk very pragmatic, step by step, because we need to solve the acute problems at the same time as we solve the long-term problems. And that's very tricky communication.
I hope we can cover that part in the discussion, but just to make sure, there is a possibility now also to raise questions, issues, comments that you have thought as you have been listening to the conversation and the dialogue so far. Are there any issues, comments, questions you would like to raise? Just raise your hand. Yes.
Yeah, I will also. Svante just say that a way to solve the problems is not solution, the end of the solution, not everything, but halfway is technical solution. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I don't know if I feel that he's sitting here and speaking with you. I have no doubt he's completely right. He's completely right, and I would address you partly as, let's say, believers, and partly as consumers. And I think he's speaking to both aspects of you in the appropriate way. When I move the four of us and you with us to where Father Guillain comes from, Kinshasa, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I don't know. Maybe he can comment. I'm not so sure that this whole package, which we call the Swedish way of life, is to what extent is it a aggravating factor for the problems in Kinshasa, and to what extent is it a substantive, is it making it worse, or is it an obstacle that as long as we go on as we do here, they will never be able to break through? That I don't know, and it's not up to me to answer the question, but I think the Holy Father wants us to listen, not to answer it, but to listen to the vast majority of people in this world whose problem is not choosing between somewhat better and somewhat worse, but basically whose choice is between a human existence that no one would choose if they were free to.
Can I try an idea here? Because I mean, if you look at Sweden today, I think we consume something like 3.5 or 4 globes. So if everyone on the earth would live as a Swede, we would need 3.5 or 4 globes. Planets. And we just have one, as we know. I mean, there are many planets, but it's just one planet Earth. And then, I mean, most rich countries, if you would also look at their consumption pattern, well, it would mean even more planet Earths. So it's not then 4 or 3.5 is quite successful, but still it's too many. And you say, well, we are in such a hurry that we rather don't ask people to change lifestyle. And you raise the question, well, I question whether that's enough, because maybe it's so difficult or such a challenge that we have to really move beyond that immediately now. And I think that's really a question to test, because in the end there is just one planet Earth. Either we live like there were 4 or 3, but it means so many will just continue without even having the possibility almost to survive, or we change deeply, and I think that's maybe what the Pope is asking us for.
Or another
comment on this?
Well, another way of putting it is that it's not a distortion to call the people who are coming to Europe now climate refugees. They are at the root of one of the roots of the conflict that they're fleeing from is drought. It's a prolonged drought and other climatic degradation. This is thanks to, insofar as it's climate, it's thanks to a 1 degree rise in the average temperature since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And now we're going to debate 1 whole degree more, or 1.5 degrees more, or if we don't fulfill our commitments, 2 degrees more. How much more of the crisis that we're living this year do we actually want? How much? How much?
Yes, Svante.
My hope is that we have new technology and also new values at all time, because I think I talk oftenly if you look back 10, 20 years back, and we can look at our situation now, I think it's much easier, for example, to decrease the consumption of meat. I don't think it's a problem for us, because we don't love to eat so much meat in the future. Because when we know much more about how we are connected with each other, how everything is produced, shoes, clothes, meat, everything, we don't like it. We are lack of information. That's why we love it. But when we got this information, we don't love it. It's a freedom to not eat meat so much as we do. So that we are changing our values, and that's my hope, because we have often the two static situation on the technology and the values. Both of them are changing. And that's why it's easier in the future than we now believe it is.
Nina and then Pedro.
I think we really are changing our values. We're in the middle of it. When I see this overshoot day, when resources have ended in September or maybe in August, I ask myself, can I afford it? I'm going to Paris on the climate summit, and I got this question, are you going? I was still thinking if I can argue for justify it, and then I decided, okay, I can do it, but I don't think you never can justify the climate impact you have. So I was thinking on these values I see changing is, young people is thinking, is it circular? Is this product circular? Can I borrow my neighbor's borrmaskin? Well, here, I don't know.
Borrmaskin.
Borrmaskin. Borrmaskin.
Borrmaskin.
It must be a drill.
Can someone translate borrmaskin?
Drill.
Drill. Borrmaskin in Swedish. Or car.
Very nice.
You know,
You should go.
sharing economy. You know, I think that the young generation is asking these questions more. So I think we see it doesn't go too fast, but we're seeing a slight change in values.
Thank you. Pedro.
I just wanted to go back a little to the acute and the long-term problems given companies that we are talking of. And yes, I recognize that there's a need for growth and jobs. But what is the acute problem in terms of Coca-Cola or McDonald's here? Yeah, might be solved as an ideal here. But the acute problem globally is water. That is a major problem. And the problem is that we cannot hold these companies accountable to your law in our country. And we are vastly losing our water resources. They can put in bigger pumps and go deeper, and it cleans out an entire valley as to their access to water. And the safety of that water. So what is acute is very different for a larger part of the population. And we are only going to be able to take so much. The same way climate-wise. We're still working on the level of resilience, pulling yourself back up on your feet before the next storm blasts you off your feet again. There's a cycle of no change. We are not seeing those impacted as being any better off than before with the wave of response that comes. So we're very afraid that a great part of the world still remains on this cyclical process of recovery and collapse, although somehow we can portray figures as being better in some degree or other. So for us, increasingly we do not see the problem as technical. Even if you turn around and desalinate water instantly, how are we to maintain that technologically? And who's going to get paid for it from what? We trade resources, and in the process we trade people's security. So there is something radical that we're looking for.
And I mean, bringing in that perspective of water scarcity, acute water scarcity, and also with the great hurricanes in the Philippine area where you come from, I mean Mindanao, and then look at it from a Swedish point of view. I mean, people here, of course, feel other acute problems. But the question is, if we are really interconnected, are we able to take your reality into our own reality and really convert? I think that is another question. And I think it would be great just to have some comments on that. To what extent are we? And then also to bring this aspect on, to what extent can I act and as a consumer? I mean, if you do those tests you can do on internet where you show, I mean, you check how many planets do I use by my own consumption, and you will find out, even if you become very much an extremist, I mean, no meat at all, just vegetarian food. If you just start never any flights, I mean, you do all the right things, in the end you will discover that you still use like 2.5 planets. So it really tells you that to act on an individual level, that's not enough. And it's just an illustration of that.
Yes.
Of course, it could be because of the models there in the internet system, but that's not the case here. It's just the thing. It illustrates, really. We need to act commonly here. And as I understand it, the Pope then brings the perspective of culture into it and says that's really a way of change. It are the values you mentioned, but I guess it goes even deeper than that and says, well, it takes the culture to make us commonly change in a way. So as a final comment from your side, taking these realities into our lives, are we able to change? And what is needed to really make that conversion change and that change happen? And not just individually, but culturally or commonly in society.
Yeah, you look at me.
Yes, you are challenged the first.
Yeah, it was such a big question, so I
just
would really...
out of what you said,
Yeah.
just some comments on that.
I wrote... you know, you have to change business and business attitudes. That's one of the very, very important. And you know, people ask me, why do we need Coca-Cola and why do we have McDonald's? We don't need them at all. And we know what's happening in India. We can see the water stress. It's not possible in 10 or 15 years to have a fabric there because of the water stress. So it's of course a big issue. And I think what we're trying to do here, it goes too slowly. Yeah. So we do need to change our attitudes. We have to help business to change their attitudes. And we have to vote for politicians that want to take leadership in these questions. And we do exactly what you said, Andreas. We have to check, what is my ecological footprint? And talk to our friends and neighbors and relatives because if you have this knowledge here, you have 10 friends that you talk to, and they have 10 friends that they talk to. So we do have to help each other because we have a system, and it's really hard to change the system. I'm trying to change the system. I'm trying to change business. I'm trying to change policy through business. So we do need to help.
Great. Thank you. Svante.
I think we have to develop this transition economy because we need to have the people with us. It's democracy. And then my hope is also that we haven't started to fight really against environmental problems. Where are the money today? They're not working to solve this huge problem. They're working with other things. So if we got that money, we can develop a much more efficient and smart society. And then I think also the values, the consumption pattern, we can't do like this. And I don't think it's a problem because we are really fed up with this type of welfare. We have a lot of things to do, but money is not going there. We have much job to do, but we are not doing that job. So if we change how we use the money, we can use it more efficient. More teachers, more people in the hospitals and everything. It's good for the environment, good for the welfare. But the money is not there. We are consuming other things. So I think my hope is we have to change, of course, and that's why I'm so happy, because I don't think this is the best situation. We can get it much better. And I think in the future, I don't think we have to work so much. We're looking for freedom. So we have to change our discussion from it's a freedom moment we are talking about, not suffering, because this situation now is not acceptable.
And Michael, if I turn to you finally.
Well, I don't want to sound too radical, so I will quote the Pope. As if he was listening, which he is. The future of humanity does not lie solely in the hands of great leaders, great powers, and the elites. It is fundamentally in the hands of people and in their ability to organize. It is in their hands, which can guide with humility and conviction this process of change. And these words were addressed to the second world meeting of popular movements, which he himself wished to have and which took place in Bolivia. The interesting thing is that when you speak in Spanish, the same words could be translated this way. And remember now, he's speaking to grassroots movements from Latin America and around the world. But you can also translate like this. It is fundamentally in the hands of people and in your ability to organize. It is in your hands, the poor's hands, which can guide with humility and conviction this process of change. So I think, end of quote, I think the radical answer to the question is that the people that Father Peter was talking about, Father Pedro from the Philippines was talking about, it's not enough for him to speak about them to us. We have to find a way to listen to them and then not stand in their way. I think we're going to get a present.
Yes.
Yes, because with these words, we will now bring this to a conclusion. I was forced to go back and make sure I get him here.
We were abandoned by our leader.
Out of a withdrawal, I came back with some symbolic more gifts. Here for you. It's a pyramid of nice chocolate with both the description about our parish here and with the Swedish translation of Lovad vare du.
Thank you so much.
Michael, you came from the other side of the world. Thank you so much. And for Nina and Svante, it's with the it's also Lovad vare du to both of you. It's also the ecumenical text on climate and the action on climate change, and finally also with the possibility of buying more books in the Catholic bookshop. So, thank you so much, all of you.